Hello, folks. This is the Impunity Observer podcast. I'm the managing editor, Fergus Hodgson, and I've got our deputy editor, Mauro Echeverría, in Ecuador. I'm actually recording this in Guatemala, our home base for the organization. We are a geopolitical research-oriented organization. We provide intelligence to those who want to learn about the nexus between Latin America and Anglo-America. And one of our investigators, researchers, Mauro, he recently traveled to Cuba, and this is an exciting prospect for him as a rising researcher, journalist, writer, to go and see firsthand what's going on the island. So I don't want to take too much of the spotlight here, and I want to get straight on to Mauro. So, Mauro, why don't you tell us how you prepared? Because there was a strange way you were concerned about being, let's say, derailed before even getting there. So why don't you tell us about the preparation you made to even just get to Cuba without getting tripped up?
Right. Hi, Fergus. I'm really glad to be here. It, it was kind of tricky, the entire preparation, because I had to get a visa to enter Cuba. So I already had to have some contact with Cuban authorities even before I got to Cuba. So basically what I did was started like securing all my profiles in every social network I have, just making them private or making sure that no one else besides my friends and my regular followers can check the information I put and I post in social media. Then it was very difficult, the situation over there, because there's always police near you, especially near monuments and stuff like this, which are very touristic places. So in places like that, it's very difficult to make questions, to talk about the Cuban dictatorship, to talk about politics, and everyone seems to be afraid of that. So that's my entire preparation was basically getting off the radar and becoming as quiet as possible, like having a low profile before I get into Cuba.
Yeah, and just to clarify for listeners, thanks for tuning in. And our website is impunityobserver.com, and the article by Mauro is Why the Cuban Dictatorship is Weaker Than Ever. And one thing, I mean, obviously I'm managing editor, so I had some role in this, but one aspect of this trip that I liked is that we didn't set the content or angle before you went. We basically went on an exploration and just see what you find and what the story is. And so was it easy to find an angle to a story to share? Did you take a few days to think what is the real story here, or was it just in your face right away?
Right. I think it was in my face right away. Even since I got to the airport, it was almost clear to me, like people are getting tired of this, and everyone seemed to be uh, like exhausted of the situation, the the day to day basis. People tend to be already tired of this. So when I talk to people, I usually talk to people um, everywhere. I talk to people on the plane. I talk to people on the airport. I talk to taxi drivers. I talk to bus drivers, people on the bus. And the first day I got there, like I remember thinking, oh my god, like everyone's tired, and I've never seen in any other country that whenever you talk to someone, like everyone's depressed, everyone's tired of the situation. So that shocked me. That shocked me, and
Yeah.
it's something I've never seen before. So that's when I got like, no, we have to do this. We have to see why people are getting tired of this. What are the main reasons?
It's so strange because years ago I traveled to Venezuela and I was in the airport in Miami and getting on, I guess, some kind of national airline, which was the only one that was going pretty much or had a deal for me. And the plane was delayed by maybe an hour or two, but by the gate it had on time. And I went up and chatted with the lady. I said, it's delayed. What's going on? She's just looked at me. Oh, And my Venezuelan friends, oh, well, you got a bit of patria. A bit of Venezuela was already in Miami. And people are just, whatever. Everything is just screwed up here.
Right. It's something similar in Cuba.
Yeah. You can't take things at face value. So you went there just a couple of weeks ago. So this is fresh. And you want to tell us also about, you said you were trying to just talk with people. How did you record them? Did you take audio recordings of them all?
I asked for their permission, and most of them were like, no, don't even like record my voice, don't film me, don't get videotape of me, just like take notes. People are still really afraid. And you know what's interesting is that when I visited some of the poorest neighborhoods in Cuba, in Havana, there's one called Jesus Maria, and another one called October 10th, Octubre 10. And what I saw on those two neighborhoods is that people were not that afraid. We're like, I hate this dictatorship. I hate the situation we're in. So I'm gonna talk about it. I'm just gonna say it. But of course, they told me not to record them, but they just spoke out loud. And this is something that didn't happen in other parts of the city. If you went to the richer parts, they were like, just be quiet. We just almost mumbling.
They had more to lose.
Exactly. So, and they still talk to me about the situation. I even talked to police officers who are supposed to defend the revolution.
Wow.
And they told me, like, we are tired of this. My cousin went, or my relative went to the United States, and he's making so much money, and the police officer was making like $20-$30 a month. So it's a very, like, people are getting to notice, because there's an important factor, which is the internet. Internet was available recently in the island. So
yes,
that is why people are now beginning to see the reality, and the reality not only of Cuba, but of other countries. For example, they see there's free education in every country. There's public education.
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. So they say, like, why are they telling me we have free education if every other country has free education?
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're beginning to compare Cuba to other countries, which makes them realize how difficult the situation is in Cuba.
And let's drill down a little bit into what you mean by this situation. So, on the one hand, Cubans live on painfully low salaries, like you said, $20, $30, maybe $50 per month, almost nothing. On the other hand, they have this very primitive ration of supplies. So clarify the two sides, what income they can get, and then what are they kind of given from the regime to live like paupers, but to at least survive until for another day.
Sure. The aspect, they have these ration cards in which the regime, like, takes, like, the regime verifies how much food they're getting to every family. So there's these ration cards, which the prices are really low, to be honest, because they're subsidized by the state. However, there's a limit. For example, I remember in the top of my head.
So with the ration card, you can buy things. You don't get given them. You can buy things in these stores.
Exactly, you get to buy, but just up to a certain amount of, let's say, oil, let's say eggs, everything.
Yeah, cooking oil. Yeah.
Yeah. So for instance, a person gets up to 5 eggs per month. They're only able to buy that in a family, up to 5 eggs. And there's also
scarcity. I would eat that in one day, just FYI.
Exactly. So it was like astonishing for me when I heard like 5 eggs. What do you do? For instance, I remember I asked a mom of 2 two kids in a hotel, and I was like, wait, so what do you do the rest of the month? Because 5 eggs last you 5 days or
A
something like
couple of
that.
days. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if you're careful about it. But she was like, I have to do magic. Like they have to make food from, like, let's say the banana peels. Yeah. And I heard like the phrase which stuck in my head, is still in my head until now, which is Cubans are like magicians because they have to create solutions for the problems they have because they don't have any alternative. So that's insane. And so basically they get these ration cards for the food. But also everything is scarce, not only food. Food is just like on the top of my mind, but there's also cement for buildings is really scarce. Also, car parts, when you want to repair your car, there are no parts. So Cubans have to be, like, I mean, taxi drivers have to be creative about that. I remember going into a cab that I had to pull a string to open the door. So that's how they tend to fix everything because there's no other alternative. It's that or do not getting, not using your car for, let's say, cab
They just
rides.
they improvise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have to improvise. And also the situation which I was describing also involves really in scarcity in terms of medicine. They claim to, the myth of the Cuban regime is they have best healthcare system or public healthcare system in the world or something
Right.
like that. And that's totally false. I talked to people outside the hospitals, patients, and they were like, I have to bring my own mosquito net if I get dengue. I have to bring almost every supply by myself. And in order to do this, they have to go to the black markets, which means larger, I mean,
Higher
it's for,
prices.
yeah, higher prices. And also, like, you can get up to 5 years of jail for doing that.
Yeah, but my sense is the black market is even if it's technically illegal, is largely tolerated. Is that the case?
Yeah, it is illegal, but everyone goes to the black market if they want to sell something, if they want to buy something, but prices are high.
Okay, your video froze there. So do you want to? Okay, we're back. You're back. Good to go. Okay. So in Moto, why? Let's flip it a little bit. One of my old Cuban friends back in Houston said that todos son presos, the Cubans, they're all prisoners. What? So we can see the economic situation is a disaster, and this has been heightened by, let's say, the COVID-19 era, and maybe I lose track of all these storms, these weather implications. But why don't we flip then? So what did people actually say about their engagement with government? Is it just there's some sort of government that's far away from them that they don't know much about? What is their engagement with the
Their
regime?
engagement with the government is the government's lying to us. The government is always telling us lies and we cannot take it anymore. They always say the same lies. We have all the time same problems or very similar problems, and there are no solutions. I remember when I went to Cuba the week before that, a hurricane passed by, and people are still with no electricity, and on the government media you can see like pictures of the Ascanel in regions like Pinar del Rio, which was very affected by the hurricane,
Yeah.
and just like supposedly talking to the people and making solutions or having solutions ready for the people over there. But the reality is that there's no solution until now, and it's been more than a month, and people are having blackouts. Outside of Havana, they have blackouts every day for 8 hours. Then they have 2 hours of electricity and then 8 other hours without electricity. In Havana, the situation's a bit better, and even people inside Havana, they recognize it. They acknowledge that their situation is much better than those of the people who live in other provinces. So, for instance, they were telling me in Havana, um, I know I'm very lucky because I only get blackouts 4 days a week for 5 to 7 hours each day. But in other provinces, they're having blackouts for 16, 17 hours every day. So they acknowledge how the government is not telling them the truth and the reality of the problems and the other different situations that are going on the island.
I see. And but when you say the regime is, or the dictatorship is weaker than ever, weaker how? Does that mean there's actually some sort of liberalization on the horizon? Do you get any sense that some change is actually going to occur?
Yeah, I truly believe that changes are coming. Let's hope sooner than later. But how we can see this is because of the public demonstrations. I remember like 2 years ago, I've almost never heard of a public demonstration against the regime.
Right.
Now it's almost weekly or some weeks every day. So you can see how people are losing their fear towards the dictatorship, and they're starting to go out to the streets and demonstrate. They're not happy with everything that's going on the island. You can in Havana, the weekend before I got to the island, I remember there were some protests right around the corner where I was staying. So I was a bit concerned. But when I got there, there were no more protests. And I asked what happened with those protests. And they were, and people in the neighborhood were telling me the police dressed as civilians, I mean, like undercover agents, beat up 15 and 16-year-old kids. And they left I mean, they really hit their faces there. So everyone now is afraid of go to a public demonstration. They're like, but they're still brave enough in some areas to go out. So it's kind of difficult, but you can see that more and more people are going out to the streets and complain about the government.
Yeah. So right now, people are still afraid that there are these agents provocateur or these infiltrators in the protests who are going to not only create a bad image, but actually start attacking within the protests, attacking the people there. Now, in terms of being a game changer, though, we know that back in the 1990s, after the Soviet Union came apart, Cuba had an extremely difficult economic situation, being so dependent on the Soviet Union. So now we have returned to that with also economic depravity, but at the same time, do you think it is, let's say, the undermining of the monopoly over information? Because of course, for decades, the Granma, the Communist Party newspaper, and the couple of channels they would let through on TV, that was basically the information. That was this fake world they created. So how much is the internet changing minds? You touched on that briefly. Is that the game changer? Is that really what is making a new, at least some liberalization inevitable?
Yeah, I believe that internet is going to be like the most important aspect for Cubans right now and for in the future, because Cubans not only see different or read different stuff on the internet, although there are some pages against the government. Um, for instance, Cubanet or Diario de Cuba, which are independent news outlets.
Is
I
is
think they're based
Catorce y
in Miami.
Medio still going?
I'm not really sure of that one. I don't think
Okay.
it is, or probably it
You're
is.
not aware of it. Okay.
Yeah, but these pages, when I was in the island, I said like, oh, I want to see this news, and I wasn't able to get into those
Oh,
pages.
right. So they're just blocked in
Exactly.
Cuba. Yeah.
But however, the important thing is that people get to talk to their families, in which in some part are in the United States, in other countries in Latin America, in Spain. So they get to see the reality of these other countries and how different the scenarios are in each country. So I believe that
Yeah.
internet is huge, is colossal, and there's with time there's more and more internet accessibility in the island. Now, a couple of years ago, you can already get mobile internet into your phone, so you can see everything from any part of the island. And they're getting these changes, which I'm not sure why the government are like fond of making these improvements in terms of internet, if it can be like something that will have an impact in the people and in the how they see the government.
Yeah. In some ways, it's a little bit similar to what's happening in Iran, where there's a changing of the guard there, although I hope so, with people being so aware of the way foreign life is. Okay. Now, you've written one article about the regime being weaker and about your firsthand experience. What could you not put in? Because obviously we kept you down to about 2,000 words. What was, let's say, next on the list that you would have loved to have shared, but didn't necessarily fit the article?
And what I really liked was talking to former political prisoners and people who were really in jail for
Yeah,
just talking or trying to leave the island, and how the situation, how they lived in prison for, let's say, 5 years, 8 years, whatever uh,
right.
they were in prison, and how they were treated. Also, how important is tourism for the Cuban state, the Cuban government, and
Yeah,
the communist dictatorship. A fun fact that I also didn't include was that Miramar, which is one of the richest zones in Havana and probably the country, is home to the Communist Party headquarters.
yes,
So you can see the contrast. While they claim to fight for the people and the poor people and the working class, they have their headquarters in the richest part of the city. So
yeah.
that's just something like
I want to
just
use I want to use stronger language about this motto, of course, but one thing that always shocks me and sometimes breaks my heart a little bit is that I'll be traveling in places like I was just in Buenos Aires and I'll see graffiti. There's these murals on the walls. And so often they'll have this almost reverent picture of Fidel Castro. What can you say to the many, many Marxists and Fidelistas, you might say, or Fidel Castro lovers, about what has come of his grand project?
yeah, it's just the Cuban myth or the communist myth is a failure. They don't have public public education, quality public education. They don't have public healthcare, decent public healthcare. Um, it's not true. And if you
What?
don't
But
believe me,
what? Yeah, no, I understand. But they would say, well, it's the blockade, the quote blockade. And you mentioned in your article that in fact, there is no blockade when it comes to food or essentials. It doesn't exist. It's just it hasn't existed for 20 years. So it's a huge distraction. But it seems like some people want to believe in the myth because it's more appealing to them. It's more exciting than the reality.
right? I mean, just it's unbelievable to talk to a Cuban, and even some Cubans still believe that. So
Some Cubans on the island, they just don't know any better.
yeah, and they are living it. So it's crazy how some people are like blind with this story of the blockade when the US is the largest commercial partner
With
regarding
Cuba.
food with Cuba. So what are you talking to me about any blockade? And there's food scarcity.
Right.
So what's the situation? How
Yeah,
would you?
it has been a huge distraction. Also, the way that that is blamed on the United States is also very disingenuous because, of course, the sanctions came in when the Cuban regime just started confiscating, stealing private properties, and they said you can't just steal people's properties, their investments. So you should blame the thieves and not those who are trying to protect private property. It's very frustrating sometimes when that debate comes up, and it seems to come, unfortunately, from people who are just ill-informed or blissfully ignorant. What are you going to call them? Useful idiots. But there are many of them, unfortunately. Okay, so folks, if you haven't read Mauro's piece, it's at impunityobserver.com, and just look up why the Cuban dictatorship is weaker than ever. And you can also follow Mauro's work on Twitter, get on our Telegram, we've got all the social media platforms going with the Impunity Observer. And I'm excited about your next investigations coming up. I mean, you've got one this month. What's the one this month on?
How U.S. money finances the Cuban dictatorship.
Okay, really? Holy moly! Okay, so what's the? Give us a little tidbit. Give us a taster so we get excited about this one.
Yeah, basically it's mainly focused on tourism, the importance of U.S. tourism in the island, and also U.S. People in the U.S., Cubans mainly, who send remittances to their
All
families
right. Yeah.
in the island. So that's the angle we're working on it.
Okay, folks. Model. Thanks for your time, mate. I'm really glad you made this trip and got home safe. The more I think about this, the more I think I'm almost shocked you made it to me. You made it out okay. Okay, buddy. Until next time, folks. Thanks for listening. Also, cheers.